What's the deal with all this movie news? Seriously, though, this has been a crazy week, y'all.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yaniz Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this episode, we're going to do a brief rundown, or not so brief, depending how much I guess I have to say about this. Rundown of all the movie news that has hit this week, some of the big stories. And that's pretty much all we're going to be doing. In lieu of a review, because I refuse to watch Transformers movies, basically. We're going to talk about all the movie news. And thankfully, there's been quite a lot this week. This has been kind of a crazy week for movie news. And it couldn't have happened at a better time that I was planning sort of a news rundown. So first of all, let's go with some breaking news that we learned earlier today as of this recording, that Jurassic World 2 will actually be called Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And as far as the subtitle, I mean, it's kind of hard to sort of speculate on what that might entail. I mean, the tagline, they're going with the return of Jeff Goldblum's Dr. Ian Malcolm, is Life Finds a Way, a clear reference to the original film. And it seems like the franchise is leading to even more chaos. And we've heard that director J.A. Bayona is sort of shepherding more of a film in style of his horror films, like The Orphanage and things like that, like his like Spanish horror style, and not as much like the action spectacle that director Colin Trevorrow delivered in 2015. As far as the title itself, it to me has just a sense of foreboding to it, just leading me to think that they're probably going to parlay off of the Jurassic World lingering plot thread of B.D. Wong's character of I think Dr. Henry Wu, taking the embryos with him and just kind of blowing that out even further. And I'm excited to see what happens with this one. I know a lot of people hate Jurassic World or are very critical of it, at least. I actually thought it was a pretty fun movie. Yes, it has its issues. There's some weird tonal things going on in there, and probably a few too many nods to the original film. But I mean, if we're not going to dock Force Awakens for the incessant callbacks to the original trilogy, you have to kind of give Jurassic World the same free pass. So I just wanted to get that one out of the way, the Jurassic World story, which is sort of a non-story, and all it is really a title and a poster that's the same logo with a subtitle that we just learned, and that's about it. It wasn't a whole. It's like nobody's really losing any brain cells or sleep trying to come up with these poster art for Jurassic Park films at this point. It's just basically the same T-Rex logo, different shades, with the same font and that kind of thing. But I will say that I'm very happy they're not going with just Jurassic World 2 as a title, because this franchise has been, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago on the Cinemaholics podcast, that this franchise is kind of ridiculous with its naming conventions, and it's, as someone who likes sort of an order to things and like a thoughtfulness and consistency, the fact that they went from Jurassic Park to the Lost World Jurassic Park to Jurassic Park 3 to Jurassic World. If they would have gone with Jurassic World 2, that would have driven me nuts. So I like that they're just going with subtitles, and hopefully it'll just be like Jurassic World blah, Jurassic World blah, instead of then get rid of numbers altogether. It's showing a real lack of imagination when you just add a number to the end of your movie title and just keep counting up from there. I think it's sort of telling that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has embraced subtitles and it's sort of skewed numbers pretty much after Iron Man. I mean, I guess you could say Guardians is doing that with Volume 2, but even that is sort of a playoff of the awesome mix within each film. But we'll get into the MCU and all that in a little bit. So first of all, I just wanted to get Jurassic World out of the way before we get into the even bigger story that really came through the last few days. That's right. I'm talking about Han Solo because this has been what a whirlwind. This has been this last couple of days, just with the way that this project has come about. So of course, this is set for release next year. It's 2018. Sorry, 2018. And Phil Lord and Chris Miller, the directors of the Lego Movie, 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, etc. They've been leading the film, with Alden Ehrenreich from Hail Caesar in the lead as Han Solo, young Han Solo, I guess, and Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, and a bunch of other people involved, Woody Harrelson, Emilia Clarke, etc. But just a couple days ago, they were fired from the project. I mean, first we heard that they had exited, and it wasn't clear exactly what the rationale was behind that. Creative differences was what they cited in their statement. Which could be industry speak for any number of things, but it came out pretty soon after that they were fired by Lucasfilm, by Kathleen Kennedy and her her team, reportedly because they were taking the project too comedic in tone. And I have some mixed feelings about this, and we're not even done laying it out. Let me lay it out. Let me finish laying it out first. So they exited. We found out it was because they were fired because they were taking the Han Solo film down too much of a comedic path. And then there were rumored replacements. Lawrence Kasdan was up there, of course, the screenwriter of Empire Strikes Back, and he's been involved in these new films as well from a writing standpoint. Joe Johnston of The Rocketeer and Captain America, The First Avenger, and Jurassic Park 3, actually, some other movies. He was talked about as like possibly in the mix. But then the third name that they threw in there is actually the man who ended up getting the position, or sort of, I guess, shepherding whatever shape this film is going to take. And that is Oscar winner Ron Howard. Of course, those of you who are a little on the younger side might not remember that Ron Howard he worked with George Lucas on American Graffiti. He directed Willow back in the 80s, which is a Lucasfilm production, a fantasy starring Warwick Davis, who's mostly known as Wicket the Ewok from Return of the Jedi. And has kind of been involved in most of the Star Wars films since then in different various roles. And has also been in the Harry Potter films, that kind of thing. So Ron Howard will be taking over the Han Solo film from Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And I'm a little disappointed in this. I'm not gonna lie. I was intrigued at the idea of Lord and Miller's take on the Star Wars universe. I thought they would bring something fresh and new and mix it up a little bit. I think that the fact that Lucasfilm got rid of them because they were making a Lord and Miller movie doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, how do you get the guys that did the Jump Street movies, the Lego movie, and then get rid of them because they're making your movie too funny? I don't understand how you didn't exactly foresee that up front, considering that that's basically their claim to fame, is revitalizing properties that you didn't think would work on screen and making them fun, adventurous romps. And I thought that tone would have fit Han Solo pretty well, considering he is very devil-may-care and sort of out for himself and that kind of thing when we meet him in A New Hope, which is after the story would be set, obviously. So I was excited to see what Lord and Miller could bring to it. And the fact that this is the second standalone film and the second time that Lucasfilm has had issues with directors. There was some of that going on Rogue One with Gareth Edwards was sort of replaced at the last minute and had Tony Gilroy stepped in to sort of finish the movie, I guess, and kind of lead some of the reshoots and that kind of thing. I think that just goes to show that they're being very risk averse with this franchise, that Ron Howard is more of a legacy choice, like I said, about his history with Lucasfilm, than anything. Not necessarily. I don't really think. Let's break it down. I don't really think Ron Howard is coming in here with a visionary take on the Han Solo movie or something like fresh and new. I feel like they've got him because they want a reliable blockbuster that they can put out and trust that it's going to turn a profit and make back its marketing budget and all of that. and that leads me to think that the movie's still going to be good because Ron Howard is mostly a solid director. But if we're looking at his stuff in the last decade versus Lord and Miller, I mean, it's like it's no contest. I mean, they've been delivering consistently strong, surprising, standout work, and Ron Howard's best films are from the 90s mostly, in the early 2000s. I mean, it's been a while since he's had like a film that really knocked people's socks off. And I feel like they just brought him in here because they know what to expect from him, and because of that, I feel like I kind of know what to expect from the movie now. Whereas before, I was more intrigued at the idea of Lord and Miller take their version of a Star Wars movie with Han Solo in the lead. That sounds intriguing. Sign me up for that. Kind of like Edgar Wright's take on Ant-Man, which we all got robbed of, and another Disney subsidiary with Marvel. And that's not to say that Peyton Reed's version of Ant-Man wasn't good. It was fine. It was fun. I like it, but I don't love it. It's nothing special to me. And the fact that Rogue One also was another. It's like my sixth favorite of the 8 live-action Star Wars films. So read into that what you will. I don't think this is going to really be. I don't think this is really going to be a top-notch Star Wars movie anymore. I mean, I think it had potential, and I was interested in it. And of course, I'm still interested in it as a hardcore Star Wars fan, but I'm not as hyped for it as I would have been otherwise. And I'm starting to realize that these standalone movies are more just going to be like, they're more going to probably be more filler between the saga installments that are the ones that I really get excited for. Like, I'm astronomically more excited for The Last Jedi than I am for Han Solo, than I was for Rogue One, than I am for any of these spin-offs, really. Save for maybe an Obi-Wan Kenobi, because Ewan McGregor needs that in his life, and we need to see it. But other than that, there's not a whole lot about this story that really inspires faith in the film and the production, or particular excitement, or I just feel like creatively this is a step backwards, when I think Lucasfilm was trying to take a chance and then maybe chickened out and decided to just rein it in for whatever reason. Although the funny thing is that it sounds like they've shot maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the film, or like half of it at least. So it makes me wonder how much of that footage is going to be scrapped so that Ron Howard can take creative control. Are we going to see how much footage are we going to see in marketing for the Han Solo movie that ends up not getting used? And I'm talking, of course, about Rogue One, where if you look at those trailers, there's a lot in there that we didn't see. There's an entirely different climax of the film that was totally unused because of all the creative shifts behind the scenes and stuff. So we'll see. I mean, Ron Howard's Han Solo movie, or whatever they end up calling this thing, I wish they would just give it a title already, because it's probably going to be something very boring and bland anyway. Han Solo, a Star Wars story, or something like that. So just give it a fucking title. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's been an interesting story to follow the last few days with this. And a lot of people are speculating that since Lord and Miller was talking with DC about doing Flash before they sort of jump ship on that to commit to Han Solo, whether or not they're going to flip-flop back to the Flash movie, since that film has also been plagued by multiple director changeovers. I mean, they've been trying to get that thing going. Right now, post Justice League, I think the only one that's really started production on the DCEU side of things is Aquaman. So, we'll see what happens with that. I'm definitely, I think Lord and Miller would have also been a great fit for the Flash. So, if they're not going to do Han Solo, at least we'll get a new project for them. They can bring their flair and their sense of humor and their energy. That's the thing that strikes me most about their movies, whether it's Jump Street or Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs or Lego Movie or something else. They bring like a liveliness to their films, and I feel like that would have been perfect for Han Solo, but it also would be pretty perfect for the Flash. So, hopefully, they'll land on their feet, I'm sure, regardless, because they're very talented filmmakers. But The Flash is not a bad place for it to land, especially now, thanks to the Flashpoint Paradox animated film, the CW series and some other stuff that I've been looking into, that I'm way more invested in that character than I have been historically. So we'll stay tuned to that. I'm sure that we'll hear about that sooner rather than later, especially if DC does jump on Lord and Miller's availability now. So moving into there, let's make talking about Flash. That's actually a pretty good segue. Let's go into some odds and ends for the DC side of things. So, few things we heard this week that I wanted to just kind of comment on. So first of all, regards to probably the biggest DC related story this week, which is of course Gal Gadot's paycheck discrepancy with Henry Cavill, and reports were coming in saying that she made $350,000 for Wonder Woman, and Henry Cavill made $14 million or something for Man of Steel, when they were both sort of in early-ish stages of their careers. She was in the Fast and Furious films, I believe 4, 5, and 6, and he was, he'd been in The Tudors, I think, and some other, some other films, but nothing. He's actually, fun fact, he was actually in The Count of Monte Cristo, the 2002 film, playing Jim Caviezel's, spoilers, Jim Caviezel's son in that movie. So do you want to see young Henry Cavill, young Superman, who was probably about, 20 at the time, you check out that film. That's actually a good movie as well. But so the internet, of course, that news dropped, and the internet lost its shit, crying, sexism and the gender pay gap and wage gap and all of that. And I was part of that group because that's bullshit. I'm a feminist, and I was kind of upset about, well, what the fuck? That's not fair. Why does he get so much more? Like 40, I think I saw something that was like 43 times more money would have been the difference between 350 and because I didn't do the math, 350 and 14 million. I'm a writer and stuff. I don't do math unless I have to. So of course it came out later that report wasn't taking into account all the bonuses and percentage of whatever that Henry Cavill had involved in that, and that he and Gal Gadot basically made about the same for their initial run as Superman and Wonder Woman respectively. So now that Wonder Woman is a huge hit, I saw something today that it passed 600 million worldwide, which is great news for the film, which I was a big fan of. As you guys know, you can listen to my episode that I did on that one already. And in the DCEU as a whole, sort of focusing more on, and Jeff Johns even said it recently, they're not really there's nothing they really need to change, he claims, but that's of course co-head of DC Films, Jeff Johns, comic book legend, that they're focusing more on hope and optimism and change, and now Wonder Woman being the huge hit that it is, really sort of validates that, a move in that direction for that franchise, for that shared universe, and sort of shifting out of the bleakness of Man of Steel and BVS, which, if you've been paying attention, I feel like those films have sort of been leading in that direction already, just kind of leading Superman's arc to a brighter place. But anyway, long story short, let me get back to what I was initially saying. Gal Gadot will now be able to negotiate for a much higher payday for the sequel, for any subsequent reprisals of that role in Justice League films and Wonder Woman films and cameos and other things, and she's gonna be she's fine. She's gonna do just fine, guys. So whether she's gonna make 14 million or whatever like Henry Cavill, I think honestly she's sort of becoming the marquee player of the DCEU right now, just by the fact that her film was most warmly received as far as critics and audiences alike of the 4 to date. So we'll see what happens with that. Of course, we've already heard that Wonder Woman 2 is going to be co-written by Jeff Johns and the first film's director, Patty Jenkins. So as far as I know, I don't think we have official word that Patty Jenkins is directing the sequel, but if she's co-writing it, actually maybe we do have official word. I'd have to check on that. But most likely Patty Jenkins will be back co-writing and directing and everything, and it should be hopefully the same team from the first time around. Whether they focus on contemporary setting, post Justice League, as has been reported, or if they go World War II or some other war or whatever, that remains to be seen. we'll get more news on that as we go along, I'm sure. But that's sort of the Wonder Woman side of things. So I was relieved to hear that Gal Gadot's paycheck was more reflective of where she's, the starting pay for a lot of actors in superhero roles like that, because ultimately it's the actor's going to benefit more than the film would by having that person in there, because Gal Gadot, Henry Cavill, even Chris Evans when he played Captain America, and I heard he got paid about the same for his first Avenger. Those characters are what makes it iconic. Nobody's going to see Wonder Woman because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm the biggest Gal Gadot fan ever. Now they might be, because now they're like, oh my god, Wonder Woman's in this movie, let's go see it. But you could have had like thousands of actresses that would have also been good fits for that film, although I think Gal Gadot was perfect and it was great casting. She's the one that really lucks out from having that opportunity rather than the other way, or rather than the film being, rather than her lending her star power to the film. Because obviously, you know where I'm going with this. So that was a big story this week, Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman thing. But then some other odds and ends just in the DC realm before we move over to the Marvel side of things. So we heard that Matt Reeves, director of War for the Planet of the Apes, which is getting such incredible reception. I'm seeing everything on Twitter about how it's a masterpiece and it's like one of the best movies of the year. And I loved Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I talked about that on this podcast. I'll probably put the link to that episode in the show notes. And he says that, of course, he's directing the Batman for the DCEU. He says that he's hoping that the film's going to have like a Hitchcock influence. And if you know anything about Batman, and obviously we all do because his parents got shot in Crime Alley, everybody knows the story at this point. We've seen it depicted about 4,500 times. That's perfect. That means that the Batman film, whether they go R-rated or not, will have sort of a dark and noirish tone to it, suspenseful, and be almost like just a crime thriller, which I think is, if you look at the best Batman film, arguably the best live action Batman film is The Dark Knight. That's very much crime thriller-ish. So if you're going to throw in a little bit of horror elements in there, a little bit of like a little bit more tension, in keeping with the Hitchcock comparison, I think that's a really strong approach, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Matt Reeves brings to it. I'm a big fan of his. I mean, like, as I said, I loved Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, probably my favorite movie that year of 2014. I love Cloverfield. I love Let Me In, and he's done consistently strong work pretty much across the board. So I think that the Batman is a good marriage of filmmaker and material, and he's been talking up, obviously doing a lot of press for War for the Planet of the Apes. He's been comparing Caesar and how he's like a tortured character to Bruce Wayne, and I think there's a lot of legitimacy to that. So I'm excited to see his vision come to life on screen. Another interesting one that I've heard this week is Joel Schumacher, of course, of Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. So he basically said that he wanted to do an Arkham film. They had that scene at the end of Batman Forever that where the Riddler is locked up, and he wanted to do a film set in Arkham. And I for one, think that's a great idea. I mean, we had the success of the Arkham games, and I would love to see someone like either Matt Reeves or some other filmmaker sort of set a Batman film really centered in Arkham Asylum, whether Batman's locked in there and you just follow the loose plot of the game, the first game, Arkham Asylum, or just some sort of variation on that. I think that that's a great idea, because you can easily do a Batman movie for 40-50 million. Batman is not the type of character that you need to have a movie that costs $200 million. He's just not. You do like a Batman like Raid or Dread or John Wick style. That's the kind of movie Batman needs to be in. You don't need beams in the sky. You don't need big CG monsters. That's not his thing. He's a street level character. So as far as whether Joel Schumacher maybe wasn't the best person to do an Arkham film, I can agree with that, because even though Batman Forever, I will defend it to an extent, I do think it's sort of a fun, campy take on Batman without going full tilt into bullshit that Batman and Robin took it into. I think that his idea there is sound. And yeah, probably best we're not getting it from him, but let's hold on to that idea that there's a good kernel there, and readdress that when it's time to make all these 6 million Batman movies that the DCEU seems like they're really focusing on, between Batgirl, Nightwing, and Gotham City Sirens. It's like everything seems to... so many of the in-development projects in the DCEU seem like they're just stemming off of the fact that people love Batman so much, which is great, but it's also like, don't dilute Batman, and Freddie and I were talking about this today, actually. Don't dilute Batman so much that we get a new Batman movie or a new movie set in Gotham City and Batman's sector of the DCEU, so to speak, every couple months. I mean, we don't need like 3 Batman Gotham set movies, a year. It's overkill. There's a lot of other DC stuff going on. But the Arkham set plot, I think, is one take that I think would really work on screen. So one other thing that I want to talk about, well, besides the fact that Batman Mask of the Phantasm is getting a Blu-ray HD remaster, that's great news for people like me who are big fans of Batman in all his forms, and including the Batman the Animated Series from the 90s, which still stands as one of the best interpretations of the character ever. But the other thing that really hit me in my fanboy heart when it comes to like Batman and kind of superhero, well, not Batman, but superheroes in general, is that Dean Cain was recently quoted as saying, Dean Cain currently of Supergirl fame, I guess. He plays Jeremiah Danvers on that show on the CW, adoptive father of Supergirl herself. And, of course, he played Superman / Clark Kent on the ABC series Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman from 1993 to 1997. He said that he's hoping for a revival of that show. They went for 4 seasons, and it ended on a very, disappointing, confusing note where they came downstairs. So I think, let me see, hold on a second. I think Lois and Clark were talking about trying to have a baby, because at this point in season 4, they were already married. Obviously she knew his identity. They were married, blah, blah, blah. And they were trying to figure out can they have a kid together? And they found out that they couldn't. And then they come downstairs and there's a baby there. And there was this whole plot line that they had planned out for season 5 about where that was going to go. And they never got to do it because, according to Dean Cain, Terry Hatcher got pregnant, and then they just canceled it. The ratings, I remember this very vividly because this part I remember very vividly because I was a huge fan of Lois and Clark back in the day. In fact, from 93 to 97, I think I got into it maybe midway through season 1 and then went back and watched the old ones. And then every week it was pretty much almost consistently on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock, and then they moved it to 7 at one point, and they were shifting time slots like crazy. That was basically my favorite show for about 3 to 4 years. Of course, I was a kid at the time. I was 93, so I was like a tween basically while the show was on the air, and I loved it, and that's part of why I like Supergirl now, is that it has sort of a similar not taking itself too seriously, but also taking itself seriously vibe. It's like a tonal mashup between something like the darker elements like Buffy, but also the campier elements like Lois and Clark. It sort of marries those two tones a little bit, because Lois and Clark, admittedly, I have the seasons on not Blu-ray, on DVD. There are a lot of episodes that are not very good, where I've gone back and it's just embarrassing to watch some of it, and you're like, wow, this was superhero entertainment in the 90s. All right, we're going with this, fine, whatever. And mostly centering on the villains. I always thought the chemistry between Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher was on point, and I was really into the love story with them, and the love triangle with Lex Luthor. I thought John Shea was amazing as Lex Luthor. And he's always sort of been the Lex Luthor that I've had in my mind, not Gene Hackman, and definitely not Kevin Spacey. Not because Kevin Spacey was bad in Superman Returns, but just because that movie's not very memorable for me in a lot of ways. So as far as the Lois and Clark revival, I mean, they're bringing everything back. ABC, not ABC. I don't know if ABC is behind Roseanne or I don't know the production company behind that one, but Roseanne's coming back, and X-Files has come back, and Full House has come back, which was on ABC and I believe is a Warner Brothers production like Lois and Clark. So I mean, who knows? Anything's possible these days. We're getting freaking... That's So Raven's coming back. I mean, we had Girl Meets World for, 3 years? DuckTales is coming back. So, I mean, at this point, it's like, it wouldn't surprise me if Netflix or Hulu or somebody bankrolls a Lois and Clark TV movie, miniseries, whatever. I don't think we need to go full 22 episodes or anything crazy, but I think throwing out like 6-8 episodes or even just 4-hour thing to resolve the plot line from the end of season 4 and kind of pick up with where those characters are now, 20 something years later. Actually, it's been pretty much 20 years since the show ended this year. So I'm totally down for that. I will watch the hell out of it. Whether or not it happens, it sounds like it's just Dean Cain's pipe dream right now, where he's basically just wants to get back to his most famous role. And, he's still in the Warner Brothers DC family, being on Supergirl, so it's anything, like I said, anything's possible. If they decide to make it a go, all they got to do is pull him over from the Supergirl set one day when he's guest starring there and sign some contracts. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. If it doesn't, whatever, but, I'm down. So it's putting that energy out there. As far as the Marvel side of things, let's switch gears a little bit. So we're hearing a lot more about Sony's plans for Spider-Man, and they're really sticking to this Spider-Man universe thing. Even though last time they tried it with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it didn't go so well. As you know, that film was pretty much just centered on trying to create a launch pad for all kinds of spin-offs and crossovers and all that. And a Venom movie was supposed to happen, and a Sinister Six movie was supposed to happen, and all of this was supposed to go down, and none of it happened because that movie was terrible. And here we are again now. Sony has teamed up with Marvel Studios. They brought Spider-Man back with Civil War. They're giving him Spider-Man Homecoming that they're working on together. And now they're back to the Venom movie that they want to do so badly because Venom is such a popular character. So I understand wanting to tap into the Venom fan base because it's pretty sizable. It's not the size of Harley Quinn or Deadpool or other I guess anti-heroes, since Venom has been both a villain and an anti-hero. Since we found out this week that Carnage is going to be the villain in the Venom movie, it's pretty safe to say that Venom himself will be more of the anti-hero stance. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sony is positioning this sort of as possibly an R-rated kind of counterpart to Deadpool for the X-Men universe, where it's a standalone movie sort of doing its own thing, not necessarily tied to the greater picture of the MCU, of even Spider-Man. Although I question how they're going to do the Venom story with the symbiote without having Spider-Man in there. I wonder if they're going to sneak in maybe a post-credit scene in Spider-Man Homecoming or something to drop a little bit of a bridge from Peter Parker to Eddie Brock, as played by Tom Hardy. And by the way, that's another huge thing that makes me a lot more excited about the prospect of a Venom movie. And we've heard that it's not connected to the MCU, and then we've heard that it is connected to the MCU. So it all appears to be sort of up in the air, I guess, and unconfirmed. I think what it is, if you read between the lines, it sounds to me like it's going to be part of the MCU in that it's going to relate to Tom Holland's Peter Parker, who is obviously interacting with the Avengers and all that. But it's not like you're not going to see Venom show up in a Guardians of the Galaxy movie or in Black Panther or something like that. So it's separate branch of the same thing, but it still counts as the MCU. Kind of like the Netflix shows. Daredevil technically exists in the same world as Iron Man, but you're never going to see them on the screen together, but they still coexist. There are slight references to the other, from one to the other. Well, from the TV show to the movie, not the other way around, unfortunately. At least not yet. But that seems like what they're going for here. So as far as what we've heard, there's no timeline set. The reports say that there's no timeline for Spider-Man leaving the MCU, or their that contract having kind of an end date in mind, and whether or not Spider-Man's going to be in the MCU for a few years, and then Sony's going to be like, nope, we want him back now. You made him viable again. We're done now. Our business, we're going to make all our money ourselves here. So hopefully that doesn't happen, because I do think that Spider-Man is, he's the marquee character in Marvel. I mean, now Iron Man is, but for the longest time, Spider-Man was the best known Marvel character, the most iconic. Basically, the three most recognizable superheroes were Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. And, maybe Spider-Man's star faded a little bit with those amazing Spider-Man films not doing so well. But I think, I think it makes sense to keep him in as part of that world in the MCU, because he does have a pivotal role to play in that. Unlike the X-Men, who can really stand on their own, Spider-Man doesn't really, to me at least, doesn't really have enough juice to sustain his own couple dozen spin-off sequels and all that stuff the same way that the X-Men films do. They can make X-Men films forever. So the fact that Sony's already trying to make a Venom movie, I'm like, okay, the Venom movie, I'll give you that one. Silver Sable and Black Cat, I don't know. I don't know about that one. We'll see. And the fact that now I'm hearing that Sony is thinking about Spider-Man spin-offs for characters like Mysterio or Kraven the Hunter, and I don't know whether they're going to be, either of those is going to be the villain in the Spider-Man Homecoming sequel, which, by the way, we've heard that Iron Man is not going to be in. They're going to trade it out for another MCU character. People are speculating maybe Captain Marvel, maybe someone else. Whether though Mysterio or Kraven, who are two characters that I think are the top of everybody's lists for Spider-Man villains that have yet to appear on screen, I don't think that we need to see a Mysterio spinoff. I don't want to see every Spider-Man villain getting their own movie. I think that you're going to be spreading it way too thin. Create a shared universe if you want, but I don't want a Mysterio movie, a Kraven movie, a Venom movie. I mean, why are we getting a Silver Sable and Black Cat movie when we haven't even met them in these films yet? I feel like they're taking on way too much too fast, and I worry that they're going to make the same mistake. Sony's going to make the same mistake that they made in 2014 when they botched the entire Spider-Verse, or whatever we're calling it. I think they need to pace themselves, and I hope to God that the MCU and people over at Marvel Studios have some creative input on some of these films, although it doesn't really sound like they do. So the whole Spider-Man thing is a huge question mark. But, you'll hear in the next couple of weeks, you'll hear Freddie and I discussing Spider-Man Homecoming in depth, and I'm sure we'll get into all of that in way more detail than I just did. So that's the MCU. So now let's go into some box office-y stuff. So apparently The Mummy, which you've heard me not so much praise. Okay, yeah, you heard me hate on it pretty heavily in the last episode. The Mummy reboot with Tom Cruise people took a giant dump on that one at the US box office. Overseas it's doing very well, but here it is not performing nearly as well as Universal had hoped, especially since it's supposed to kick off their dark universe. I think what the darkest thing about it is the fact that it's flopping hard in the States. So we'll see what happens with the dark universe plans, whether those shift. I mean, I know we have Bill Condon already lined up to do Bride of Frankenstein, and I think that has promise, and I'm excited to see that with Javier Bardem as Frankenstein's monster. And they're still looking to cast the Bride of Frankenstein. They have a tough road ahead of them. I'm sure that they're going to continue forging forward, just because the worldwide gross is salvaging the long-term prospects of this franchise. But man, we'll see. There's some course correction that needs to happen there. Of course, also Transformers is another franchise that's people are getting really excited about, and I've talked about the fact that I'm not talking about that on the podcast because I have zero fucking interest in the Transformers series. I saw the first two and it was like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, yeah, fuck yourself, basically. So as far Transformers 5, no, not feeling it. But it's apparently tracking for the lowest box office opening weekend of the franchise. So I don't know if that's going to affect the studios. I believe it's Paramount. It's going to affect their plans coming up for all the Bumblebee spin-off and Transformers 6, and they have like a whole story group put together to develop new ideas and make a Transformers shared universe. I don't know if anyone is going to change their, kind of redirect some of their ideas or consolidate some of their movies, that they have planned, or what they're doing with that. But yeah, I hope that that's a sign that audiences might finally be sort of getting tired of these films, because I mean, a lot of people certainly are. A lot of critics and a lot of audiences. Like, it's the kind of movie that, if you're into it, you're all about it. But the rest of us are just like, oh man, this shit again. Every couple of years, I know that weekend I need to make other plans, because not about that. And especially since the last night is reportedly kind of serving as a launch pad, setting the stage for all these sequels and spin-offs. Paramount's probably sweating a little bit, although, like The Mummy, it'll probably do well enough overseas and internationally to warrant Transformers 35. So, yay, I guess, for those of you that are into that. Speaking of sequels that nobody really gives a crap about, at least I don't, we received word this week that Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, that's right. We're getting 4 sequels. I had to stop and really? Avatar 5. Wow. That they are officially beginning production in September with, of course, director and writer James Cameron leading the charge on this. So we'll see about that. I know that now that the Pandora attraction at Animal Kingdom is open in Disney World, they're banking hard on this pulling and this developing into a full-fledged franchise, even though, I mean, it's been 8 years, and does anybody really want to see that anymore? Like, I'm just curious. Who's excited for Avatar sequels? Like, I'm sure they'll come out and they'll be decent, because James Cameron usually makes strong movies. There's barely a James Cameron movie that I don't really care for. The Terminator films, and Aliens, and True Lies, and Titanic, I think is I'm just tired of it as a pop culture phenomenon. It's just, when you live through that movie coming out, you're either embracing it or you're just turned off to the whole thing. So, and Avatar is fine. Like, I like Avatar, but it's not one that I feel like compelled to revisit a lot or pop in the Blu-ray unless I'm showing off my my TV or my projector or whatever. It's not exactly the kind of film that inspires people to go out and buy toys and be like, oh, I'm a Na'vi dressed as a costume for Halloween. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like it's going to be interesting to see how those films turn out and how well they perform, considering how long it's been since the first movie, and considering that they're not even putting out the second film and then waiting to see the reaction. They're just going full bore into 2, 3, 4, 5. Granted, it is one of the highest grossing movies of all time, and I think it still might be the highest grossing movie of all time, or the second. It's up there. It's between that and Titanic, I know, for all time. I just don't know. If you listen to the Slash Filmcast, there's a running joke on there where they're talking all the time about whether that Avatar has. Yeah, see, it is the highest grossing worldwide at the box office with 2.8, if you were for rounding up, $1 billion. But they talk about Slash Filmcast whether Avatar has cultural relevance, and I really 100% don't know that it does, aside from the fact that, like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie. Yeah, blue people. I get it. It's cool. There's nothing. There's no catchphrases or characters that are really stick in your mind. Maybe Neytiri, I'd say, comes the closest, but I think that's really a testament to Zoe Saldana's performance, her motion capture performance in that role, more than the writing or anything specific going on. It's more of a visual spectacle than anything else. It's not really a story that I don't think particularly resonated with a lot of people, and considering it is basically Pocahontas, Ferngully, and that guy. It's very archetypal storytelling, and not a whole lot of stuff going on in there that I think really broke the mold from anything other than a technological standpoint. Speaking of, again, more franchise stuff, this was a big week for franchise news, guys. I don't know what the hell. Well, we heard about Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and that's the reboot slash, sounds like it's going to be a sequel of sorts to the 1995 film starring the late, great Robin Williams. And it sounds like they're going to really closely tie it into the original film, where there are clues left by Alan Parrish, Robin Williams' character from the original, that kind of inform this new adventure and drive it forward. And I think that is a smart way to honor the original film and the actor the character that Robin Williams played, as well as the actor, sort of tribute to him, have him remain part of the continuity, but not feel beholden to retell that story or to start from scratch. I think with the Ghostbusters reboot, if they had done that similar approach, and I've said this before on the podcast, I'm sure, and acknowledged that there was that team in the 80s, and that these ladies, sorry, not girls, that's sexist, that these ladies were restarting the Ghostbusters franchise, literally sort of 21 Jump Street it a little bit, where they're like, oh, this Ghostbusters franchise has been collecting dust for 20-something years. Why don't we bring it back? That kind of thing. I think that film would not have gotten, it still would have gotten a lot of hate from a certain group of people. But I think that it would have sort of taken the edge off of some of that animosity towards the idea of rebooting something that people love so much. So I think the Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle is smart in taking that approach. We also heard this week that Saw 8, which initially was going to be called Saw Legacy, has been retitled Jigsaw. I mean, we don't know a whole lot as far as the story, as far as what this new film is going to entail, other than it's the fact that it's going to be pretty much, I think it's going to be set in real time with the other films. It's been about 7 years since the last one, and presumably Tobin Bell is back as Jigsaw somehow. Flashbacks, I guess, I'm assuming. And spoilers for the Saw franchise, he's been dead for like 4 movies, but they keep bringing him back via the incredibly convoluted storytelling that franchise has had, which is basically, it's a soap opera with blood and guts everywhere, essentially. It's a splatter opera, whatever. Well, let's coin that term. It's a work in progress. So I think that's interesting. It sort of sounds to me, if you're calling it Jigsaw, that it's going to be kind of the origins of that character. But if they were calling it Saw Legacy, I don't know if that implies that it's going to be about maybe he has a daughter, that Laura Vandervoort from Smallville and from Supergirl also that she's starring in the film. So I don't know if it's going to be one of those things where it's like the next generation, and like Jigsaw has a daughter who's like discovers her father's work and like picks up the mantle of the Jigsaw killer, and that's where the legacy part of it comes in. Or if the fact that it's titled Jigsaw means that it's going to be an origin story, and we're going to see him, Jigsaw, when he got diagnosed with cancer and when he sort of developed this persona and his first games. I think you can kind of take it either way. I do think it's critical that Tobin Bell is back, just because he lends so much gravitas to that franchise. That franchise whatever parts of that franchise work dramatically work because of Tobin Bell, because he has that voice and he has that presence on screen. That's part of why Saw 2 and 3, I think, are two of the best entries in that franchise, because he has a lot of screen time in both of them. So it'll be interesting to see where the Saw franchise goes with this 8th installment, and whether they go for a sort of a soft reboot in focusing on an entirely new protagonist, whether they take it more from Jigsaw's perspective, or how they're looking to revamp it. Because I was a fan of elements of that franchise. I'm still not into the whole quote torture porn phenomenon, and I'm not really, I don't go to those. I never went to those Saw movies for the blood and guts and the shock value of it all. I found the storyline and the philosophy behind Jigsaw's activity and that sort of perverse sense of morality fascinating, and I did get caught up in the soap opera of it all, and the fact that you're like, they would hint at something, an envelope goes under a door, and you have to go see the next movie next year to see what was in the envelope and whose door that is, and that kind of thing, and the way it all connects. I thought that was really fun, and that's what had me coming back to those films. So we'll see what happens with that, but I'm intrigued if not necessarily like hyped about it. So one final news story I'm going to talk about. I know it's, like I said, this was going to be sort of a rundown of a bunch of different things, my thoughts on them, and just it's been, like I said, it's been a big week for movie news. It's a lot of major franchises have been dropping new scoops and big developments, and of course with Star Wars leading the charge, really. So the last one is that Daniel Day-Lewis, 3-time Oscar winner, announced this week that he's going to be retiring from acting, and that this upcoming film that he's doing with Paul Thomas Anderson will reportedly be his swan song. And there's actually a lot of Daniel Day-Lewis movies I still haven't seen. And even though I was not necessarily the biggest fan of There Will Be Blood, although I do need to revisit it, his performance in that, for which he won the Oscar, the second of 3 Oscars, is phenomenal. And he has sort of a commitment to his craft that very few actors have, and he's method to a T. And I think that, that's a dying art in film these days. The fact that we're hearing things like Johnny Depp is just like wearing an earpiece and having his lines fed to him because he doesn't want to memorize them, and he's just basically literally phoning in his performances, and that we're hearing that some actors tend to do that on even huge movies like that. The fact that Daniel Day-Lewis only does a movie every 2 to 3 years, and when he does, it's phenomenal, and he basically becomes that person. I mean, you watch Lincoln, that doesn't seem like the same guy. That soft-spoken actor does not seem like the same person playing, I'll drink your milkshake. I drink it up. He's got such impressive range. And I think if he is really going to retire, as it sounds like he is, I think it's a tremendous loss for cinema. And, at least he left a very sizable and very substantive body of work in his wake that we can go back to and enjoy. So if this is the end of Daniel Day-Lewis, I think, hats off to him. I understand if he wants to take a break. I mean, he's done enough. Not take a break, but if he wants to end his career, because God knows he's accomplished more than 99.9% of actors will in their careers. Sorry for any of you actors listening, but 3-time Oscar winner, and as respected as he is, arguably one of the best, if not the best actor of his generation working right now. He deserves the right to end it on his own terms and kind of move on to another stage of his life if that's what he what he feels like he needs to do. So that's a little bit of a sad news for cinephiles out there, but I think it's an interesting one, and we'll see what his last performance, if it is in fact his last performance, what that holds for moviegoers when it comes out, I think, this fall. So that's all for now. This is the Crooked Table Podcast. You can rate and review us on iTunes if you'd be so kind. You can also find us on Stitcher. You can send me a tweet if you feel like you want to argue with me about something that I said, if I rubbed you the wrong way with any of my reactions to any of these news stories, or my lack of a Transformers review. Go for it. I'm down. I can take it, guys. Reach me on @CrookedTable on Twitter. Also find Crooked Table Podcast on Facebook and the other social medias. You can find more podcast reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Next week, I'm still ironing out the details, but it sounds like I will be able to get Kai in here to do a crooked commentary for Batman and Robin, marking the 20th anniversary. I know the last one we did was Nightmare Before Christmas, and that was last year. So we're taking a little bit of cues from our first crooked commentary, which was of Tommy Wiseau's The Room, and taking the piss out of a terrible movie, which ultimately are probably more fun to record commentary tracks on and just marvel at the awfulness of it. So Batman and Robin is a good target for that. So look forward to that next week. Until then, I've been Rob. We'll catch you around the table next week. Roll credits.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
The art of the low KED.